On this Saturday night, war over words.
96 is not to go.
Thousands protest Quebec's controversial French language bill.
Every Quebecer should stand up and speak out.
Why some fear it's an attack on English. Also tonight, parents struggling to feed their children.
I'm on the floor crying, like looking at them, telling them I'm so sorry. I can't provide for you.
What's driving a critical shortage of baby formula across America? Plus, what the nose knows after COVID. Rising cases of parosmia, robbing people of their sense of smell. And six-figure Scotch.
When it's sold, that's it. We won't see another one.
The rare whiskey for sale in Calgary, if you can afford it.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Sophie Louis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with breaking news out of Buffalo, New York, where a gunman opened fire at a grocery store in a predominantly black neighborhood. 13 people have been shot, leaving at least 10 dead.
This is the worst nightmare that any community can face, and we are hurting and we are seething right now as a community. The depth of pain that families are feeling and that all of us are feeling right now cannot even be explained.
The FBI and Buffalo police have a suspect in custody and say they're investigating the shooting as both a hate crime and racially motivated violent extremism. Witnesses describe him as a male in his late teens wearing full camouflage, a black helmet, and carrying what appeared to be a rifle. Investigators say the suspect may have been live streaming the shooting online before he was arrested. Back in this country, Quebec's new legislation designed to bolster the French language is inching closer to becoming law. The province says it's necessary to protect a language it says is under threat. But English speakers and Indigenous groups say it's an attack on their rights. Opponents took to the streets of Montreal today, saying Bill 96 goes too far and will restrict access to education, healthcare, and justice for non-French-speaking Quebecers. Amendments in recent weeks have softened some of the bill's most extreme propositions, but as Dan Spector reports, it hasn't been enough to stop the growing opposition.
A massive crowd taking over downtown Montreal. Thousands of people choosing to spend a hot, sunny Saturday expressing their anger over Quebec's controversial new language law.
This really is an issue of protecting Anglophone rights.
Personally, I'm feeling a little threatened.
Surrounded by a sea of English in North America, Quebec Premier François Legault believes French is in danger and Bill 96 will protect it. Those opposed say such a law will have consequences.
Every Quebecer should stand up and speak out against these detrimental infringements on our basic rights and freedom.
The event began with a rally at an English language college. Many protesters upset Bill 96 will force students to take more courses in French.
A lot of things that are available right now that won't be available because of that rule.
Indigenous leaders also expressing concern the bill will make it harder for their communities.
Our priority is the Mohawk language, and we're already English-speaking people. So Bill 96 is imposing a third language on our people, and it's going to make it a whole lot more difficult.
But education was not the only issue on the minds of the demonstrators. Others here because they fear Bill 96 will mean limits on health care services.
So if your doctor speaks English and is legally not allowed to speak English to a patient, there is something wrong in that situation.
There are also concerns about reduced access to the legal system and new powers for the province to make sure businesses are operating in French.
The language police show up with no warrant, to search and seize, and they can force me to give my password and give them access to everything that's on my cell phone.
Politicians from all levels of government joined the rally. Anthony Housefather led a delegation of Liberal MPs denouncing the bill and its use of the notwithstanding clause to override the charter.
We do not believe there should be laws that take away the historical rights of English-speaking Quebecers.
As the demonstration reached its final destination outside the Premier's Montreal office, a small group of counter-demonstrators greeted it with French music.
I think the bill should go more far.
Some believe this was just the start of a movement mobilizing against Bill 96, but that likely won't stop it from being passed. Quebec's majority government is expected to vote it into law in the coming weeks. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Abortion rights supporters flooded the streets of several major U.S. cities today in protest over a looming Supreme Court decision that could signal the end of legalized abortion nationwide. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets across the country in the first weekend of protests that organizers have dubbed a summer of rage. Demonstrators held rallies in response to that leaked draft opinion from the Supreme Court earlier this month, which indicates the court's conservative majority could soon overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade decision of 1973. The court's final ruling, which could give states the power to ban abortion, is expected in June. Supply chain slowdowns and product recalls are creating a crisis for parents across the U.S. as they struggle to find formula to feed their babies. The White House is promising action, and parents say it can't come soon enough. As Jennifer Johnson reports, doctors are warning even a temporary shortage might have long-term consequences.
Across America, store shelves selling infant formula are going bare, and parents are panicking.
They're searching left and right. You know, I've gone to pretty much every store and called every store to search for it, and we can't find it anywhere.
About 45% of infant formula in the U.S. is out of stock after a key producer, Abbott Nutrition, recalled several brands and closed its Michigan plant. 2 babies died after drinking its formula. That left millions of parents frantically searching for something to feed their babies.
I'm on the floor crying, like looking at them, telling them I'm so sorry. I can't provide for you.
The White House has launched a new website to answer parents' questions on the shortage while promising to import more products. President Joe Biden is also demanding U.S. manufacturers immediately increase production.
We have to move with caution as well as speed, because we got to make sure what we're getting is in fact first-rate product.
Doctors are warning the shortage could have long-term health effects on the infants.
Poor growth and poor development. A baby grows maximally, the brain grows maximally, and in the first year of life. So deficits in nutrition will significantly impact the baby.
The same level of shortages hasn't been reported in Canada. But parents in the U.S. trying to order formula from north of the border and other countries are being hit with $200 and $300 shipping fees.
I love you, Mommy.
Jess Butler, whose son's medical condition requires he drink formula, even flew from Seattle to Texas to buy some from a woman she met online.
I spent 2 days talking to her and trying to meet at places, and she never showed, and eventually just blew me off.
Congress is now demanding the 4 leading formula manufacturers explain what they're doing to fix the crisis. In the meantime, breast milk banks are begging for donors to provide milk for the most desperate and fragile infants. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Governments across Canada are trying new tactics to stifle the runaway cost of housing. Home prices have grown by more than 50% over the past 2 years, a phenomenon that's given rise to a widespread housing crisis. And although there are signs the increases are finally slowing, the pressure on governments to act is leading to some regrettable decisions. Ross Lord explains.
On the premise that outsiders are inflating real estate prices by purchasing properties in Nova Scotia, the provincial PC government decided a new property tax would help level the playing field.
My intention all along, the intentions of our government all along, were to improve home affordability.
In March, the average price of a Nova Scotia home was up 23% from 2021. Houses routinely sell for much more than the asking price. The new tax went into effect on April 1st, but it was no joke. It was meant to raise $65 million for the province. But instead of cash, there was backlash, mostly from non-residents who call the measure mean-spirited.
I thought it was fundamentally unfair.
Joel Blau has family roots in Nova Scotia. He's been coming to this summer home since 1948, a tradition he cherishes.
I'm an American. I'm not a Canadian. But I've spent now almost 75 years every summer in Nova Scotia. And I think they thought that it was, kind of a relationship that could be monetized.
Less than a month after he announced the tax, Premier Tim Houston has decided to scrap it, saying it could undermine Nova Scotia's welcoming image.
I believe the risk of reputational damage to Nova Scotia is becoming more and more real, and it's something I'm not willing to accept. So we'll find another way to address the housing issue.
The federal budget contains measures that are also receiving some lukewarm reviews.
The stuff they've done is not too significant. Like, for example, banning foreign buyers for 2 years. Those are all band-aids.
The budget also allotted billions of dollars for construction, something analysts say could make a bigger difference by creating more supply to meet the growing demand for housing. Recent hikes in interest rates are beginning to curb runaway price increases as Nova Scotia and other provinces wrestle with how much influence they should exert and the right way to go about it. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Government officials are also working to lower record-high inflation across the country. The Bank of Canada has raised its key interest rate and warns more hikes will come as it signals a commitment to bring inflation back down to the 2% target. But some question whether that's the right move, with many Canadians carrying high amounts of household debt. This week on the West Block, Eric Sorensen speaks with a former parliamentary budget officer to get the ins and outs of the bank's role in addressing inflation. Eric.
Sophie, at the gas pump, on grocery shelves, just about everywhere, prices are going up and fast. Government spending through the pandemic, bottlenecks in the supply chain, and then the war in Ukraine brought a spike in oil prices, all a perfect storm for inflation to soar.
We're dealing with inflation rates much higher than the Bank of Canada's targets.
On the West Block, Kevin Page, the former parliamentary budget officer, described an inflation rate we haven't seen in 30 years. For decades, the Bank of Canada has kept close to the 2% target for inflation through the economic ups and downs. But this spring, inflation climbed to 6.7%. And because of that, Page sees interest rates rising in the months ahead.
We should expect increases of policy rates, mortgage rates, consumer lending rates of at least 1 to 2 percentage points over the next year, year and a half.
Inflation has put the Bank of Canada in the spotlight.
I will fire the governor of the central bank to get inflation under control.
Pierre Poilievre, a leading candidate for the Conservative leadership, has bluntly said he'll replace Tiff Macklem with a new bank governor. But Kevin Page doesn't think that would make inflation go away, and he suggests maintaining the independence of the bank is important.
It would be quite a shockwave, a global financial shockwave, to have a government literally remove a central banker who's, by all intents, seems to be doing a fine job, but in doing a very difficult job.
Page doesn't expect the inflation rate to start coming down yet. The next monthly inflation numbers will be out later this week. Sophie?
Thanks for that, Eric Sorensen in Ottawa. And you can watch Eric's full interview with former parliamentary budget officer Kevin Page on tomorrow's West Block, right here on Global. A tour bus operator has been charged in connection with a deadly crash in Jasper National Park nearly 2 years ago. In July of 2020, an Ice Explorer vehicle carrying 25 people rolled down an embankment on the Columbia ice field. 3 passengers were killed. 14 others suffered life-threatening injuries. The company operating the vehicle, Brewster, now faces 8 charges under Alberta's Occupational Health and Safety Act. They include failing to control hazards, not checking safety equipment, and failing to maintain and mandate seatbelts on board. An RCMP report into the accident is still under review. Prosecutors will determine if the evidence warrants any criminal charges. Coming up, a dire warning about a growing global food emergency as the war in Ukraine continues. And later, a groundbreaking study into sudden infant death syndrome, the new research that may partially solve the mystery of SIDS. With the war in Ukraine showing no sign of slowing, the G7 is warning of an imminent global food shortage and energy crisis. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly is in Germany for the summit and says Canada is committed and ready to send ships to European ports so Ukrainian grain can flow to those who need it the most.
We are an agricultural power. We have a lot of knowledge and expertise in grain growing and grain shipping, and we will make sure to free Ukrainian wheat.
The main point of discussion at the meetings, food shortages caused by Russian blockades on Ukrainian grain. Germany's foreign minister says up to 50 million people, particularly in Africa and the Middle East, will die in the next few months unless Ukrainian grain can be accessed. The focus for foreign ministers now turns to Berlin, where Sweden and Finland are preparing to apply for NATO membership. But today, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Finland's president that would be a mistake. After weeks of heavy bombardment, Russian forces are finally withdrawing from Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Ukrainian officials say they're entering a new long-term phase of the war. Despite Russia pulling back from Kharkiv, both sides are still locked in a grinding battle for the country's industrial heartland in the east, where Russian forces are launching mortar, artillery, and airstrikes, focusing on supply routes around the Donetsk region. 2 people have been arrested in connection with a fire in Delhi that left 27 people dead. Police say the owners of a company that manufactures security cameras are in custody after the fire reportedly started in their office. The city's fire chief says the flames spread quickly to other areas where plastic and a large amount of cardboard was being stored. The building did not have any fire safety equipment like extinguishers. If found responsible, the pair could face life in prison. Ahead, rising cases of parosmia, why the post-COVID condition is nothing to sniff at.
You're watching Global National.
Researchers in Australia believe they've found the reason some babies die from sudden infant death syndrome. The study by doctors at the Children's Hospital in Sydney found a lowered level of a certain enzyme explains the malfunction, which causes some babies not to wake up if they stop breathing in their sleep. For years, it was suspected SIDS was caused by a defect in that part of the brain. The doctor in charge of the study says families who've suffered this tragedy can now know for certain there is nothing they could have done to prevent the death. One of the common symptoms of COVID-19 earlier in the pandemic was a loss of normal smell and taste. But for one woman in Alberta, the smell distortion showed up months after she had the virus. And as Su Ling Go reports, her story is becoming more common.
Grade 3 teacher Christy Chippenuk hasn't been able to eat lunch in the staff room ever since her sense of smell got messed up.
Garlic and onions are really bad. So if I'm walking down the hallway, I'll be like, oh my gosh, like it's just so, and I feel rude obviously doing that, but there's nothing. I had to buy a nose plug.
It started in February, a couple of months after she had COVID-19. Her toothpaste suddenly tasted rancid, and her favorite drink, coffee, smelled like gasoline. Sometimes she smells hairspray or vomit all day. There are very few things she can eat.
Meat is a no-no. Meat smells and tastes rotten completely.
The condition is called parosmia, and it's becoming more common as COVID infects more people.
The nose is the port of entry. So this is why we had, especially with the original variants, so many people that complained about the sense of smell.
Dr. Johannes Fresnelli specializes in smell research. His team followed hundreds of healthcare workers infected at the beginning of the pandemic who had any smell issues. After 5 months, 1/5 developed parosmia. After a year, that number had grown to half.
So we have these sniff and sticks.
He says smell training can help some patients.
So we actually think that the exposure to those odorants helps the olfactory receptor neurons, the neurons in the nose, regenerate from stem cells that we have there.
Dr. Carl Philpott in the UK is also studying parosmia. His theory is COVID affects the receptors in the nose.
For example, you take the smell of a rose, 13 different molecules that could make up that smell. And if you can only pick up 6 or 7 of them, you're getting a different signal. So you're only getting pieces of the jigsaw and it smells wrong.
The smells we're smelling, they are atrocious.
Christy's beloved coffee maker sits unused, and her diet consists mostly of avocados. She says her coworkers and students are supportive, but the condition can be depressing.
It is so isolating.
Su Ling Go, Global News.
Next, liquid gold, the rare Scotch with a 6-figure price tag. It's often said that Scotch is liquid gold, but the bottle in this next story is worth a lot more than its weight in gold. Gil Tucker has more on a rare whiskey that'll set you back 6 figures.
This is rather precious and it's irreplaceable.
Kept safe in its own little custom-made box. A sight to behold, a bottle of Scotch that's pretty old.
It was distilled February 3rd, 1940 during World War II.
Andrew Ferguson showing it off in the back room of his Calgary liquor store.
Well, it is certainly something.
Longtime customer Rob Rosenfeld checking it out.
Of the 250 odd decanters produced, it's the last one available. When it's sold, that's it. We won't see another one.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's what $140,000 buys you.
Wow.
You heard right. $140,000 and it's yours.
It'd be interesting to have at home.
Yeah.
I think I would have to have some rather long and potentially difficult conversations with my spouse.
Something that had no doubt sparked some interesting conversations in a lot of homes. If you had a spare $140,000, what would you spend it on?
Pay my debts.
Buy a car? I will buy a house.
Would you spend $140,000 on a bottle of whiskey?
Definitely not. Who's crazy enough to do that?
A gentleman in Texas bought one at a bar and bought out the entire bottle for himself and some friends to drink in one night.
Andrew had 2 bottles when the shipment came in from Scotland 2 weeks ago. He's already sold 1.
Rare pieces like this, the closest similarity would be something like collecting art or fine cars.
High-end scotches are a big part of his business.
So this one here is a 50-year-old Glenglaza. It sells for $11,500.
Or shell out that $140,000 for something really rare.
So this is one of the most expensive whiskeys ever sold.
Just the thing for a special occasion.
Do you wait for your 80th birthday? Do you wait for 2 people to turn 40? Or some combinations of there within?
Or just a Tuesday night.
Or just a Tuesday night, exactly.
Gil Tucker, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Sophie Louie. Tonight's Your Canada is Grand Bend, Ontario. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Colleen Christie will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.